Good evening, everybody. I am Joe Aguiar. She is Michelle Bohtello. Welcome to Connecticut Politics TV Live. Michelle, obviously, last night the election in around the nation and here in Connecticut will just sort of get people caught up as to where we are right now. In most of the races, things have already been settled, so we're good to go. We know that Governor Ned Lamont has won. Bob Stefanowski
Yeah,
very graciously conceded last night. That's the kind of stuff we like to
we
see.
like to see exactly.
A hard fought election. It wasn't really close. It was a 13-point beating, which I had thought, Michelle, it would be a lot closer. This was a 3-point race 4 years ago. And given the conditions of Connecticut and how aggressive Bob has been, I'm surprised he kind of got his doors blown off.
I was actually really surprised. With all the media, with all the social media, with all the emails and texts, which I'm hoping will stop soon. Um, I'm really surprised that he did beat him as much as he did. I wasn't too surprised that he did beat him, but like I said, as much as he did, and I don't know the percentage of Rob Hotaling, the independent candidate. I don't believe he did very well himself. I don't even know the percentage there.
Rob had 12,000 votes, which was about 1% of the vote.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Again,
he did a good campaign.
My frustration here is so many people talking about change, looking for change. There's a solid independent on the ballot, and I don't get it. I really don't get it.
Yeah, and Rob's a smart guy. I mean, he really focused on the economy, and he had the capability. He has the ability to really kind of take it around and bring the economy back to Connecticut. He had a big business plan. Him and Chip, they really worked with some good policies. Unfortunately, you know what? I think it's just that seeing independent on the ballot just kind of turns people off. And I hope that changes. I think about Amy Chai as well. She had some great policies. And what got me was in the 3rd district, the Rosa, I saw, Leslie DeNardis, and she did pretty well. She didn't even campaign. She didn't want to debate. She didn't even want to run. And she did that well because I believe she had an R next to her name. So something has to give. It would be nice if something changed.
We will actually at 5:45 be talking with Rob Hotaling, so we'll get some insight on his thoughts. My whole thing, Michelle, and I think what is holding people back is, again, sort of that fear, if you don't vote for the Democrat or the Republican, that you're somehow responsible for the final result. And when you look at now what looks to be about 154,000 vote difference between Ned and Bob, Rob's 12,000 didn't hurt anybody.
Exactly.
And casting your ballot, if you weren't satisfied with either of those candidates, wasn't going to change this election very much. You could have supported somebody with good ideas who you liked, or you could, and listen, that's not to say I'm sure there's plenty of people that love Bob and Ned, but I just felt the dissatisfaction level. And all we hear is people complaining about the 2-party system. Nice to have a viable third candidate on there. Right. And, it seems like that sort of fell by the wayside.
With Amy too. So very quick. I'm sorry, Amy, as you know, I was her campaign manager. She got a lot of nice emails stating, "Oh, I wish you won. I voted for you." And I think the issue is that she had her website out there. She had her policies. She talked to people. We campaigned really hard, but the media just did not want to cover it. And so, I'm just thinking about this 5th district race right now. The media was all over it, which kind of inhibiting, I think, other races, the other districts, if you will. Jamie Stevenson, that's my own take on it. But again, it's who covered it, who gave us any type of exposure. It just wasn't there, unfortunately, and that needs to change as well.
Yeah, absolutely does. Another race I thought was going to be closer was for a Connecticut Attorney General, where the incumbent Democrat William Tong captured 57% of the vote. He actually did better than Bob did in his race against Jessica Cordes, the Republican, as well as a Green Party and the People's whatever, this other party, AP Pasquarella, and Ken Krajewski, who I chit-chatted with from the Green Party. Nice enough fella. But again, this was a blowout. The comptroller's race with Sean Scanlon and Mary Fay. Another one I thought might be a little bit more, 10 points there. Stephanie Thomas crushed Dominic Rapini by 12
she
points.
Really did. Yeah.
Cynthia Jennings, who was the independent and who I was proud to vote for because she knows what she's talking about. And that should very much be, should be an independent office without Democrats or Republicans.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
Yeah. She pulled 26,000 votes, which earned her 2%. So that's actually impressive. Obviously not enough, but she got quite a bit of attention. The treasurer's race.
Someone like her has the qualifications, and you're right. It should be an independent. So this is where we need change.
Really should be. So the race for treasurer between Eric Russell and Harry Aurora, again, not that close, about a 7-pointer. The independent in that race, Jennifer Baldwin, 24,000 votes.
Not bad.
So right, some of these independents pulled some decent vote totals. In the and we talked about this quite a bit at length in the early voting. 20%, 60-40, this thing went in favor of this thing moving forward to the legislature so we can get some early voting in Connecticut. Again, this had nothing to do with absentee ballots or any other access. This is just literally, we are one of 4 states. You've probably heard this by now, but one of only 4 states that does not have early voting. What that's going to look like remains to be seen. Basically, we answered yes to. You guys can kick around some thoughts and figure it out. And so we will see what that looks like.
Well, the voters made their choice. They want early voting. So it was a good thing.
Again, I have no problem with early voting as long as it's not a ridiculous amount of time. You know, we've seen Pennsylvania, 50 days of early voting.
Oh, yeah.
That's quite a bit, yeah. That's too much. That's too much. There's a reason that the election's in November, right? Yeah. A week. I don't think, I mean, if you went 2 weeks, I'd be like, oh, that's a lot. 50 days is, I just think, an obscene amount of time. And it does open you up, Michelle, to shenanigans, you know?
Absolutely. Well, forgive me, but, and I'm going to say it, someone like Fetterman who can get elected, something's going on there. I'm sorry.
Well, sure. And I wonder, Michelle, how many people voted for Fetterman before the stroke, or at least before that disastrous debate performance, where maybe after seeing that, they were like, oh, ooh.
Yeah.
Can't go and get, you're like, hey, I need my ballot back. I need to make a change. You're not going to be able to do that. So I think for that reason, it shouldn't be too early, because I think you're doing yourself a disservice at that point.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Do we know how the districts are doing?
Oh, we'll get to the districts in a minute. We're going to hit the last one of the biggies, the Senate race between Richard Blumenthal and Leora Levy, which, again, absolute blowout. He was leading the polls by 15-17, and he ended up beating her by 14. I don't think this surprised anybody.
No, I mean, she's a newcomer to politics. Not elected to any office. And I think she ran a good campaign, but I think just people saw her as maybe not ready, not maybe too Trumpian. A bunch of issues came up that I read about why people didn't vote for her or why people did vote for her. And this is where I think Republicans need to make a decision for the next trajectory.
Well, I'm glad that we're going to talk about that tonight, and I know we'll be talking to Dan Newmyer, who is a political strategist, because after we finished up last night, I went on WICC with Paul Pacelli, and he basically asked me the Republicans obviously came up pretty short here. And I said, it's time to take a look in the mirror.
Yeah.
You couldn't have asked for more ideal conditions for a Republican rout or the red
absolutely.
wave, as everybody was saying. And the fact that it didn't happen at all has to, again, you've got an unpopular president in a bad economy with high inflation, rising food and gas prices, a war overseas. The southern border's a mess. Crime is, rampant, if you will. And America looked at that other choice and was like, nah, we're all set.
And not to mention the polls. The polls, all the polls dictated. The Real Clear Politics dictated that this would be, detriment with the daunting task that the Democrats had to kind of put out there, if you will, and show the American people. And so even with that, they still did well. So again, that's why the Republicans need to rethink their whole strategy right now.
So we'll do let me just run through the district races. Obviously the 5th, my understanding is the 5th, they're locked at 50-50. Johanna Hayes has about an 1,800 point lead.
Okay.
That's with all the ballots in, but they are going to, I just heard this today. I believe this is confirmed, but they're going to do a recount.
They will. Okay.
And after they do this recount, right, we'll find out who won. That's the only one that was close.
Yes.
As it turned out, much to my surprise. In the first House district, John Larson blew Larry Laser out of the water 61-38. District 2, Joe Courtney keeps his job with a 14-point win over Mike France. District 3, as you mentioned, Rosa DeLauro, 56-41. Not one of her bigger victories of all time over Leslie DeNardis, which you mentioned, didn't really campaign much.
No.
Amy Chai did lock up 4,000 votes on the button, according to this, 4,000 even.
Straight votes.
Yeah, Justin Paglino, which I told Justin he mispronounces his own last name. It should be a Palino. But Justin got 1,878 votes.
Oh, good for him. It's funny. You said you were surprised about the 5th district. I'm not, only because they put George there to win. He's not from that district. He was a state senator. They thought they could, if you will, the race card with a black man, a black woman, the Hispanic, if you will, although he's Jamaican, but they put him as Guatemalan. There's so many issues there. And then the media was the big thing. He got national news. He got, money from national PACs, and he was endorsed by, Elise Stefanik and, Kevin McCarthy and what have you. And so that focus on him, I think they neglected the 4 of the districts. And, I just think about like Jamie Stevenson, great candidate, who was neglected. She could have done better, I thought, if they gave her a little bit more attention, if the media, if the RTCs gave her more attention. But yeah, we'll see what happens in the 5th. This is really interesting.
Well, as you just alluded to in the 4th, Himes beat Stevenson by 18 points.
Yeah.
Which I'm shocked at, because I think Jamie Stevenson is a fantastic candidate. And really, I talked to her a few times, just talked to her about a week or so ago, and I noted to her, she's out all the time, constantly meeting with people. And I thought, I don't know, she's a good candidate. Blowout, absolute blowout. So
I know, it was surprising, actually, to me as well.
Yeah. As far as how the rest of the race is shaped up in Connecticut, locally, I don't, and I'll say this, I think when you look at the local scene and the national scene, and short of George Logan pulling off an upset here, and with a recount, he looks like he's down about 1,800 votes.
Right.
So it's highly likely that Johanna Hayes will keep her seat.
Yes.
There were not a lot of upsets in the election last night. Not anywhere. Not in the North, not in the South, not in the East or the West. It seems like everybody who we had all sort of predicted. The polls nailed it this time around. I think the polls were a little conservative, to be honest, because some of these races ended up being bigger blowouts than the polls were even saying they would be.
Right. It was the red wave that wasn't, unfortunately. It's funny because I think it just they failed to materialize. Nothing came about that this huge thing was going to happen. And I even heard silliness like the blood moon, if you will, that night. So people are, I guess people are excited, and I get that. But that's normal. When you have a one party rule, if you will, when the midterms comes, usually the opposite party wins, and vice versa, what have you. And so I think people are excited. People were just overly anxious for this to happen, and it just seems weird that it didn't actually.
Yeah, that's a good word for it. It's funny. I went into the ballot yesterday to vote, and I knew who I was voting for in almost every race.
Right.
And as I mentioned to you, I still wasn't 100% sure who I was going to cast my ballot for governor for. And I just can't help but think of how many people who might have still kind of been hemming and hawing about what they were going to do, who went in there and did what they always do. And they just cast the ballot for a Democrat, despite everything else. And I do think that, listen, I think on a national platform, we've talked about this. The Republicans have serious credibility issues with a lot of people in America. A lot of people in America don't love the election deniers. It was nice to see Dominic Rapini get crushed in this election. A Trump guy who thinks Connecticut's biggest problem is rampant election fraud.
Right.
I was glad that those candidates got rejected. I really am. And with the exception of JD Masters in Ohio, I possibly the Arizona gubernatorial race isn't settled yet either between Lake and Dobbs. But other than that, most of the rest of the Trump candidates didn't do well.
Oh, yes. And like I stated, it was the red wave that, was not. And the red wave failed to materialize, even though majority will probably go to the Republican in the House. The majority will go to them. And most analysts predicted Republicans would take the House, and it looks like we're headed into that direction. And now would be the time, like I stated, for the Republicans to really put their money where their mouth is, if you will. Stop the crazy spending and policies that Joe Biden, has inflicted on this country. I believe the Republicans, hopefully, they'll think about what their strategies, if you will. There has to be some introspection, and with the talking, the House, with talking about the House, taking back the House, and their policies. I believe they had. I believe Kevin McCarthy came out with a plan to, do what the American people wanted to do. Let's see what happens. I want to see what happens. And, with taking the House back, I'd like to see Biden's spending stop, if you will. And it only really is with one majority vote, with one vote majority. That's all it takes right now. And we'll see what the Senate has to do with all these. I know the runoff will happen in Georgia, I believe, on December 6th. But it's interesting because I believe it's Nevada with Adam Laxalt, if he doesn't win his seat, Georgia's not viable anymore. So Adam really needs to take that seat. And I don't know what happened yet, but we'll see what happens there. And then, if that pans out, then the Georgia will have to do the runoff, and we'll see what happens from there.
Oh, and now joining us.
Oh, no.
The man, the myth, the legend, the strategist, Dan Newmyer.
Please don't feel his head anymore. It is.
Dan, why do you think that the red wave did not materialize last evening?
I think it's really a regional effect that we're in Connecticut. And whether you go right over the hill or the valley, the politics are going to be a little different. If you go in the city, if you go in the country, and in Connecticut, there's just certain stuff that isn't going to fly. We have a very educated population in terms of voting and overall compared to a lot of the country. And we've come to expect, because we've been conditioned by the culture of the Democrats for 30 to 40 years, to expect these things. And I think whenever you run a campaign based on fear that there's overwhelming crime, but then the statistics don't bear that out, or whether you are talking about how bad the economy is, but then there's jobs all over the place. And I think the former president had a lust for power that he worked with his former strategist, Steve Bannon, on, which was to kind of take over local RTCs and create lanes for the federal candidates to come and be able to run strong. And so that's how they kind of slipped in with that primary for Themis Claridis, where Levy was able to jump in. But as soon as she did, she lost the election, right? She as soon as she won the primary, she lost the election. It was a hot August day, and they were able to rally these supporters through local RTCs in a plan to win a primary. But it came with catastrophic results here in Connecticut because people aren't ready to accept Donald Trump as a candidate ever again. For a lot of reasons, due to the election denial stuff and how corrosive that's been. There's been a lot of violence popping up between partisan groups, which is really something that we should be concerned about. We don't want civil war to break out because we can't figure out an election. But there's a lot of good things that happened here tonight. Last night and today, as this is sorting out. And what that is in terms, if you're a Republican, we need to put forward leaders that reflect the people of this state. And much of the independent, unaffiliated vote goes to Republicans, but they don't affiliate. And so if we ask ourselves, well, why don't they affiliate? It's primarily because they don't agree with the policies that the CTGOP is putting out in their messaging. And that means there's a disconnect between what the people at the top want and their policies and what the public wants. So when there's that disconnect and your policies are not what people want and you're losing elections, where can you go after that? The only place you can go is, there's fraud or there's something going on or they're cheating or, it's never that your policies are terrible and nobody likes what you're proposing. It's always, the other side is cheating and sowing doubt in our institutions and stuff like that. So,
well, Dan, let me ask you,
sure, please.
I know Florida is different from Connecticut, but do you think Ron DeSantis, who won heartily, do you think he's kind of the new face of the Republican Party? Do you think Florida is the face?
Well, I think he's the old face of the Republican Party.
Well, the reason why I ask is because, he can bring about, if you will, Trumpian policies, which I believe were good policies for America, but without the combativeness. Like, when he has a speech and, media goes after him, he handles himself, control. He still fires back. He shows he's a strong leader. But what do you think? Do you think it's not him? Because he won. I'm thinking about.
I think that he would be a better choice. Anybody's going to be a better choice than Donald Trump, in my opinion, because he can't be trusted to protect, a state like Connecticut where he needed to tread lightly, and we could have taken proven leaders who have proven themselves effective in Connecticut. As far as Ron DeSantis goes, he's the old face of the Republican Party, and when I say that, the old face is not the offensive face of what we're calling, I guess, Trumplicans now. There's Republicans and there's Trumplicans. And the Trumplicans are it's a my way or the highway group. And the Republicans are, we stand by our values and we want to push our policies forward and we want to negotiate the best deal we can going forward, but we're not going to wobble on our policies. Well, the Trumpian group, the Bob Stefanowskis, George Logan, Dominic Rapini, and Leora Levy, these people had no principles that they stood by, and they were shifting their platform. And George Logan, for a long time, he spent building an image of being a moderate. And that was really obliterated by his campaign manager, Liz Koranowitz, who hooked him up with Stefanik. And really, they dug into and bought into this Steve Bannon plan, or this Trumpian plan, that they were going to ride this red wave into Connecticut. To me, it just seemed insane that you would put anybody up against Richard Blumenthal that had zero experience in public service. But I think so. Ron DeSantis is a controversial figure. The Trump's already hitting him because he sees him as a threat, and he's well liked in Florida. And a lot of people during the COVID time moved down to Florida because they like those policies, right?
Yeah.
Come in my yard and you try and steal my truck, yes. I'm gonna pop you with my 38. And that's, I think the sheriff said one day, we're in a law and order state, and if you go into somebody's house, they're going to shoot you. And we encourage that. And I think that's a little, but I'm all for home defense and everything, but it's people who really like that pro-American stuff. And so pro-American values are not Trumpian values, right? They're pro-American values. And if Trump embraces some things that are pro-American, then that's his choice to do that. But we can have a lot of different candidates who produce pro-American values. And then we also have to say, well, is that value really pro-American, or is it exclusive, perhaps, of something?
Well, I mean, I prefer pro-American. I like American values. I just, going back to George Logan, for instance, though, I campaigned with him, and the issue was him just being a politician. He had those straight talking points. No policy came out of his mouth. We're just going to beat the Democrats, and
it almost worked, didn't it? Because he used
exactly.
Simple messaging, right?
He was a conservative. He was a moderate conservative. So it's like you didn't know where you stood with him. It just seemed like, again, and I was telling Joe, he doesn't live in the district. He had all this money coming in from national conventions, and so you don't know what you stand with him. He's a typical politician who wanted to get elected. So
yeah, I don't know if typical politician is the right phrase for that, but he was groomed for that position, and as you found out the hard way, right, is that there was a lot of obstacles that kept you from even getting on a stage with the guy. So I find that very problematic. But in terms of DeSantis, I think that pro-American message is going to go forward, and I think Dr. Amy Chai explains it kind of interesting. There's an authoritarian type of message where you're punished for your bad things, and then there's like the communism one where they take over, the totalitarian where they take over your brain, and everybody's afraid to tell the truth or go against the thing. So neither are good, but if one gets out of control, which didn't here in Connecticut. And I think we really dodged a bullet as Republicans, no pun intended, by having this group be tested in with the electorate, and now they got handed their hats. I was going to use the other word, Michelle, and
their caps.
Their ass. I was going to say ass.
You were going to curse
on my own network.
Oh. Clutching my pearls.
Is it time for a commercial, Joe?
Stop clutching your pearls, Joe. No, it was. So we really dodged a bullet here because these people, even with like Anne Dauphiné, is a super conservative out in the Putnam area and just opposite politics of mine, right? She was calling Lamont a Nazi and all this stuff, and really the hard right of the hard right, very conservative woman. But she actually voted for Peter Lamage over Levy and did not buy into the whole thing because she understood that Levy was just taking the party apart, and it was going to hurt people like her if she warmed up to that. So that the people who warmed up to Levy, one was Jamie Stevenson, they paid a price for doing that. If you warmed up to Bob, you paid a price for doing that. And we should all kind of take a look at and say, well, why didn't this go through for any of these people? And it's because they were following this ideology, which isn't accepting the election, which has, the election denying aspect of it, the January 6th thing of saying that that's legitimate political discourse, and it's not. And that's what leads to people losing faith in our institutions like the FBI and the CIA and all this. And what we have to understand is that if we lose faith that our in our institutions, all that, the whole thing starts to unravel on us, right? So what we need to do is buckle down with great work like you two are doing, which you're bringing out the issues on your new show here, which I just am really over the moon about. Everybody's raving about it. It's blowing up. The views are going, viral on us, and we actually have.
Well, I really appreciate Joe. I appreciate Joe letting me on here.
Oh yeah,
I'm
look
at
the big
he makes it so easy for me. So we'll get better.
Yeah,
I know.
It's my pleasure. You're great, and I appreciate you saying that, Dan. We did a 3-hour show last night, and it was very well received from the numbers I was looking at.
And it was like seamless. It was very natural, and you gave a lot of pertinent information about what was going on with the election. So
I think
if have a lot of
Aaron Lewis would have stayed on there all night.
Yeah, Aaron Lewis is
he's great,
such a wonderful guy. I feel like I could ask Aaron Lewis a question. I could get up, leave. I could go bake a cake. I could come back down, and he would still be going.
Yeah, with that kind of theatrical.
He does not even need a prompt to get going.
I love it. And he's got some. You guys have to stay tuned because we've got some really good news. Good news or bad news? I think it's good news actually. That'll be coming forward soon with him. So,
his lawsuit stuff is really amazing, and it's going forward. So we're gonna hear some stuff about it. But really, getting back to what you two are doing, and I want to let the audience know it here is that I talked to a lot of journalism friends of mine, and I said, look, I want to. We have this vacuum. We're losing hundreds of journalists a day and everything. And I'm no journalist. I'm a strategist. So I don't have the credibility to come in here because I'm always working some angle, right? But you two are talking about issues. You're going to take headlines, give credit where credit's due, and discuss the issues just like people do around the dinner table and in the workplace, and try and grasp what the middle of the line here, what the two sides are, so people can get a fix on that. And then once we hit session, you guys are going to be up there with the press passes and doing some reporting there. And other people who are watching this, if you have a show that you'd like to put on TV here at CT Politics TV, it's a channel that's on Roku, Apple, and Amazon, so it goes out over the whole world. And we advertise the channel too. So it's great for local Connecticut businesses. We're going to have a town searchable thing to have your own landing page. And so if you have a show or business that you want to present on television here, it's very affordable. You have this great anchor show 5 days a week from 5 to 6 p.m. which is CT Politics Live with Joe and Michelle. And I'm really excited about what this is going to mean for average common people to be able to have the voice that they're not afforded always in politics by the media, because they're overrun. I really support local journalism and all the people doing it, the reporters, the people who make that their life, because it's not paid as great as it should be. They're getting rid of journalists so that we have less news sources. So what you're doing is very important in highlighting what these real journalists are doing, and helping people discern what's truth and what obviously is not.
Well, I was talking to Joe earlier, and I was talking about, how all the media attention was going kind of to the 5th district, and the 4 other districts kind of, meandered underneath it, if you will. And, that it could have been a different outcome, I believe, with that. So.
Yeah. So there's a lot of good things coming here on CT Politics TV. And tonight, I guess, Rob Hotaling's going to be coming up, right?
Yes.
Oh, that's wonderful. And working with that campaign early on was really a great honor to me. I met with Chairman Teleska back in, must have been March or April, I think. And we talked to Rob, and I got to know him about his background. And he said, look, I want to do this, can you come help? And whenever you're going to do an independent run, it's a real heavy lift because there's no resources available or scant resources usually. And you have to develop those. Yeah. So that meeting went well. And I said, look, this is a good guy. He's a problem solver. He's smart as a whip. He's done a lot of things in his life that could transfer easily to being the governor of Connecticut. And we need another choice. And when I finally realized that Bob Stefanowski was just didn't have the integrity to represent anybody I love, I had to provide some type of someone else to vote for, right? I wasn't going to make everybody vote for a Democrat. So I found somebody. I helped get them going over 3 months, and then they took it their way. So anyway. If you guys want to have me back, or you have any questions later on, I'm happy to come on. And otherwise, I'm a big fan. You look great on the big screen, and I'm excited that I'm a small part of this big show that you
make us look good, Joe.
Well, listen, I appreciate you guys are so sweet. I'm all about one thing, and that is
money.
Facts. Oh, I'm about 2 things, Dan. Money and facts. That is so important to me that, we bring a show here, and Michelle and I have our own political opinions. We'll share those from time to time. But for the most part, we're just going to bring you factual information.
And just remember, Joe, I'm always right.
She thinks she's always right. That's what I love about Michelle.
That's why
we're always going to deal in factual information, because I think that's really all that you can do, and you can still go whichever way you want. I just want everyone to be on the same page and to be equally informed. And so
then when they get in the second half of the show, you get a guest, or you guys can bring up a topic and take it wherever the heck you want. And the other thing I want to point out to people is, look, we're not professional journalists by any means, and we're not coming off that way. We're citizen activists, I guess would be a good word for that, and we're trying to help bring us all together, get some unity so we can solve problems together, and this is a first step to doing it. So welcome on board, and I can't wait to watch the next interview.
I'm very excited for the next interview, because I'm proud to say, for the second consecutive Connecticut election, I did not vote for a Democrat or a Republican.
Oh, I know.
I
He
voted
keeps
for
rubbing
this
that
man.
in on us. He keeps rubbing that. Oh, look. Oh, I was planning to get out of here. You can't.
You might as we got to
He
have a
looks
quick
so good.
crossover here.
Nice.
So good. I never like to be on the same screen with him. All of a sudden, I look older. Less dynamic.
You look just fine, Dan.
There you go.
Yeah.
You're becoming a politician, Rob, already.
See you, Robin, and congratulations. You really ran a good race and learned a lot, and you went from zero to hero pretty quick, and it was really fun to watch. And after I departed, you guys took it and really did a good job. So thank you very much. I really enjoyed being part of it. And you guys have a great show. I'll talk to y'all soon.
Bye, Dan.
All right. Bye-bye.
And welcome, obviously, to the show to Rob Hotaling. Obviously not the result you wanted, Rob, last night, but I think you got to be proud. I'm so annoyed because much like 4 years ago when I cast my ballot for Oz Griebel, who, in my opinion, was a far superior candidate to Bob and to Ned, here we are again 4 years later, still not a big Ned guy, not interested in Bob. You were just this beacon of information and of thoughtful ideas, no talking points. Just here's how I would solve Connecticut. We talked about this last Friday night, Rob. Why are people afraid to pull the trigger on the independent?
I think it's cultural. I think that the Republicans and Democrats as parties have been around so long, so entrenched in the American psyche, the Connecticut psyche, folks just can't do it. Joe, there were dozens of people who wrote me apologizing to me where they said, Rob, I'm sorry. I like what you and Chip had to say. I really liked how you performed in the debate. I loved when I met you in X town, but I had to vote for X or Y, Ned or Bob. And I say, I understand. Vote your conscience. But is that really your conscience voting for you? Your job is to vote your conscience. And a candidate, in my opinion, should earn your vote. It shouldn't be automatic, regardless of party. And I don't know, Joe, it's obviously I'm a little disappointed, but considering who we competed against and what we competed against.
That's right.
You're talking about all-time record-breaking dollars. Someone put it lightly to me earlier today, and I've spoken to a lot of people today. I spoke to the governor, full disclosure.
Nice.
I sent Bob a message. I spoke to Senator Blumenthal to wish him well. I spoke to a bunch of people, right? But this one, and no one remained nameless, but they said, Rob, you know what you're like? You're like a little incy-bincy shop. You and Chip are flipping burgers next to a massive corporation, and they just spew out commercials, millions of dollars worth. They have a massive parking lot. People are used to coming in and out, buying from them. And it's like, hey, we're over here. We have great burgers. It doesn't matter how tasty your burgers are, how juicy and how much the smoke floats over. They'll still go into that big old store and buy because they're used to buying. And I was like, that's an analogy I haven't heard. And he's like, you're just selling burgers that people weren't ready for. And I'm like, I understand. But when will people be ready for those mental burgers?
That's right.
And he says, well, that's why. It's a good platform you've laid. You've shown that it can be done against the hardest of circumstances. And it's funny, the spoiler vote, Joe, I don't want to hear about the spoiler vote, and Michelle. I don't want to hear it.
I've heard it. I've heard it all.
150,000 votes. There's nothing the independent party line could have done to do any of that.
That's right.
And
it's funny because I on Facebook, you go back and forth. And as you know, Rob, I was Amy Chai's, the independent candidate for the 3rd district, her campaign manager. And promoting her, you'd get RTC members telling me, how dare I? And if the Republican loses, it's 100,000. I'm not kidding you, 100,000% my fault. I'm like, that's impressive. I didn't know I have that power over the electorate. I'm like,
wow,
what?
Michelle, congratulations.
Thank you. I was impressed with myself. But you're right. This is the mentality, unfortunately. And the same thing with you. And, it's funny because people talk to me about you too. And they're like, wow, what a smart guy. He can do something with the economy. I'm like, yeah, you think,
right.
Change would be nice.
Rob,
not just the same.
Are you surprised, as I am, that Ned beat Bob by a lot more than they did the first time around? Just given, and I know, listen, right? We all agree inflation's not his fault, but this is all happening on his watch. And people are so concerned about, I mean, everybody said the economy, the economy, the economy. All right.
Right.
How do you not hold that guy responsible at all for it, to the point where clearly people who had maybe voted Bob last time didn't this time?
Yeah, I think it comes down to, honestly, I got to say, my introduction with the Hotaling Beckett plans, I think really shone a light on Bob's challenge. And I think that's why he really wanted to sue. It wasn't about the line. It was about, hey, there's some people over here who might make the rest of us not look so great. Money, honestly, I think what I've learned is there's really three things that drive success. There's really basically name and face brand recognition, right? There's money, and then there's likability. You might add in the fourth, which should be important, which is skills and experience. But let's put that one to the side for a moment.
That's the old United States of America.
Why would that matter, right? But when you think about it, Ned wins on likability. I win on likability. I don't think Bob wins on likability. And I'm just, you can't make a person likable, it's just hard to do, right? And then when you talk about money, unfortunately, Ned had more money than Bob.
Yeah.
So Ned wins on money. Then when you talk about skills and experience, regardless if you think Ned did a good or bad job, and this is why I really think, if you go behind the numbers, I had some interviews today with some Hearst Media folks. I went behind the numbers, and I'd love to ask you guys, and this is my analysis. The blowout, to the key point you're asking, Joe, the reason it was a blowout, it was a total rout, is about trust. The way I look at it is, folks said, I don't really know Rob. Likeable guy, great ideas, but I don't know him. He doesn't have the money. He doesn't have the establishment. I don't know if I can trust him. Okay. Ned, they said, well, I like Ned. He doesn't have any ideas, but do I trust him to get through a crisis? Wait a second. He just got us through COVID crisis. So he can be somewhat trusted, right? Regardless of transparency, I do trust him inherently, the registered unaffiliated. But when you got to Bob, I'm sorry, Bob, if I would have advised Bob, you're going to go sign a contract with the Saudis. Don't you know that would directly undermine your trust factor?
Yeah.
And then when you kept being all dodgy with the press about it, specifically Kevin Rennie would not let it go. I think you guys know Rennie would not let it go.
Yeah.
And I think the voters said, you know what? We don't trust you, Bob. And we'd rather put our trust in Ned. And I think that's really the numbers.
For a guy who, for all intents and purposes, has been campaigning since he lost in 2018, you would have thought, right? Maybe I got to do something to make me likable. That should have been the first thought in his head.
Likable and trustworthy, Joe. Two things.
Yep.
There was a lot. There was a lot going on. I agree. Since 2018, I mean, he did worse. Is that awesome?
I'm so stunned by that. I really am. But like Rob said, maybe we shouldn't be.
no, but look, honestly, when you take it back, see, Bob doesn't fit the rank and file. You have Bob, and you have rank and file.
Right.
Then you sort of have Levy floating over here. She's not exactly rank and file. And as you guys know, I was part of the Republican Party 18, 20 months ago, maybe, I think. What is it, November? Okay. Let's just say the summer of 2021 was when I was the last time I was Republican. And I'm going around challenging the psyche. I want to talk to delegates. I want to talk to leadership. I spoke to Sue Hatfield. And they didn't want to hear from me. They did not want to hear from me. And I said, I think I represent the real direction that the party needs to go. But okay, you guys don't want to talk. And I had Mr. Michael Telescope come and whisper in my ear going, listen, Rob, you have a home with us. It's just, guys, I'm telling you, how many years now, Joe, you know better than I do at this point.
Same thing.
Dan left. He's the strategist. Is the strategy working? Were any races run by the Republicans? If you're 0 for, what is it? Say statewide, the 6 statewide. You're 0 for 6. You got 2 Senate positions. 0 for 2 there. So you're 0 for 8. Then you got Congress, 5 seats. Maybe they have to win on lawsuit and recount. But right now, Johanna looks like she still took it. So you're 0 for 5 there.
Right.
What's the count? 0 for 8, 0 for 5, 0 for 13.
Yep.
You're 0 for 13 in the big ones for decades. I'm sorry, Mr. Proto. Absolutely. What you're saying ain't working, and you need to change it. And I'm not here to challenge the whole Republican Party infrastructure. What I'm saying is you have to look at the data and go, what is the electorate telling me? The electorate's telling you we don't agree, change strategy, change candidates. So
yeah, absolutely.
I think the whole thing needs to get torn down and built back up. I was a Republican in this state for a long time myself. I stopped 4 or 5 years ago being a Republican, tired of watching Tom Foley lose election after election, tired of watching Bob Stefanowski lose election after election, tired of some other big money millionaire stepping in trying to buy a Senate seat. It's not working. And Ben Proto, he should resign his job.
Rob, what do you think? You nominate Joe for chairman?
It's time because it does. And Rob's being nice here, but I think the Republican Party, especially here in Connecticut, it's a different animal. Bottom to top, that it's got to be rebuilt because, like Rob said, you just keep losing election after election after election. And now we're getting it's Democrats run the state because you don't put forth quality candidates. You don't push your candidates. You're not funding your candidates. They have to pretty much do it themselves. And that's why we end up with the garbage that we end up with election after election. It gets tiring. And I would say this, for anybody who's a Republican in Connecticut, who hasn't had representation in Washington, D.C. since the 80s, isn't this tiring for you? Isn't this tiring? Don't you think that it's time to take a look in the mirror and say, boy, we're getting our butts handed to us constantly. It's been this way for the better part of like 30 years. To try something else.
Absolutely. If I look at it, I'm like, and look, I'm a big football fan. I don't want to apply the Cleveland Browns, but you're losing for a decade.
Yeah.
2 decades. 3 decades. What do? You normally would clean house. You'd say, wait a second, we got to recruit great folk. I don't want to use a sports analogy here, but you'd go back to the drawing board. You'd talk top to bottom. You go, let's change the coaches. Let's change the general manager. Let's change the strategy. Let's recruit. You got to tear it apart if you have that legacy of loss. But the problem is, Joe and Michelle, it's just entrenched. I think people just identify and they can't break themselves out of it. It's adaptability. And I will say, it's not that the Democrats have it right. They're just more adaptable.
Yep.
Right? They're just more adaptable. They're like, you know what? Abortion. We're going to adapt. Inflation. You kidding me? Look, we said this in our last show. Regardless of how you see it, when Bob goes spend surplus, spend, you still use that word spend. And then you have who? Governor Lamont, the Democrat, saying, let's be conservative here and not spend. That's like going against his own nature. But guess what?
Yes.
He's adapting to the environment. I'm sorry. In order to win, Connecticut's not. This isn't Georgia. This isn't Arizona. Yeah. This isn't Texas. Yeah. So for me, I think that we have to take a centrist approach. And I just bought Lieberman's book, for example. Not to bring up Lieberman. But my point is this: he has a book about centrism. And it doesn't mean you change your philosophy. What it means is you temporarily adapt to make an agreement to make sure that we can either get a bill or get some type of initiative that helps us all. And I don't know if there's enough centrism as a mindset right now going. But when I look at it, stepping back, I think that inherently we had a great opportunity here in Connecticut for the unaffiliated. I think a lot of them believed in what Chip and I did, and a lot with what I was saying. And I got outpouring from hundreds of people. Really, when I look at Twitter DMs, Facebook DMs, even outright just posts, I got personal email, I got calls, I got texts, hundreds.
Yeah.
So many people. Nobody really threw mud at me. Yeah, there are the haters, Michelle. There's a couple of people who literally, there was a person the night before. You're gonna laugh, Michelle. They said, "Rob, you haven't dropped out yet?" And I'm like, "It's the night before."
Yeah, just for you. Yeah, I know. It's like you have to laugh. You have to laugh. Exactly.
They're a conservative. They said, "You're gonna hurt Bob tomorrow," and I wrote back,
Hurt
I said,
Bob.
"I'm pretty certain nothing's going to change between now and in the morning at 6 a.m.
Right.
There's nothing I'm going to do." So truth be told, that person did not respond to me. But but yeah, I think that's just part of the equation.
So
think
Rob,
that. Go ahead, Michelle.
no, I was just going to ask Rob, politically, what's next for you?
Well, look, I have a good problem. Which is I got a lot of people who called and wished me well, and there's so many people who are like, "Rob, you got to keep going. You did so great." And I'm like, "Well, thank you." Even though for me, I'm like, "Geez, 1%." But again, when you put it in context, like, again, you're talking about two monsters, two multimillionaires, two establishments, PACs. You're getting, put to the side. But
you had very little media attention. Yeah.
Right. But I've told people, tell me my ROI in 5 months versus Bob's 5 years are unequivocal.
Yeah.
They're like, Rob, if you had the same money in the same time as Bob, you would have crushed it. Some people told me that. And I said, well, maybe. So people are telling me, someone reminded me too. Actually, it's my brother. My brother reminded me, Michelle, he goes, Trump was polling 2%. And then he just took over.
That's
and
true.
I'm like, well, I'm not saying like that, but I get what you're saying. The point is, you can go from like a little bit and it means nothing. It really is, you know what? You did it. You've been there. You've done it. You went through the fire. You came to the other side.
That's
and
right.
we respect you for that. You know what? Next time around, I'm going to really take a more serious look at you. And so
is there a next time?
Yeah. Well,
awesome.
I say, look, I'm a fan of Arnold Schwarzenegger, and I'm like, I'll be back. Right. So it's in what capacity? I will tell you, I have opportunities for board or commission, or I'm talking about community leaders as well, besides administrative office or whatever. I don't know what I want to do really. I think for me right now, I just want to spend some time with the family and just do nothing until January. And then
does take a toll.
Yeah.
Campaigning is daunting. Yes.
Yeah.
Good for you. That sounds great.
Well, you should be very proud of yourself.
Yes.
I will say that I thought, and I'm hopeful for your political career, because I think you have great potential here to be a leader in the state of Connecticut. I think you're the kind of person we desperately need. If you want to fix the Republican Party, let me know. I would be happy to. I've got some thoughts. I've got some ideas.
I'm telling you, Rob, we gotta nominate Joe.
Ben Proto will be like, "Here, rewind that session."
I told him we'll nominate you.
Oh man, but look, there's a lot of work to be done. And the great news is, in my position, look, I've spoken to Governor Lamont. He says that he's willing to work with me on the economy, jobs. Clearly, he knows that I have different ideas and approaches than the others. And at least I'm in a place where I'm not like, there's no tribalism. It's like they're willing to listen, and I'm willing to engage and listen, and maybe we come up with a better outcome. I've also, by the way, spoken with Bob. Bob agrees on the achievement gap. And I really look forward to, and if he's honest and true, which I hope he is, and I've spoken to him, Hartford Current, he mentioned this morning when he conceded that he's looking to still move forward and hope to fix Connecticut. He's going to do that. So I'm also going to look to work with Bob and say, listen, Bob, you might have got, regardless of the outcomes of this, we still have, what's the word I'm looking for? Responsibilities. We're still leaders in each of our own rights.
That's right.
You know, people still look at Bob as a leader, regardless if you won or lost, man. What are you going to do next? People are watching and they want to know what type of character you have. So if he's serious about closing the achievement gap, let me tell you, I have ideas, he has ideas, his people have that, I have ideas. So, well, let's figure it out. Don't wait for the Democrats. They haven't done it in 20 years.
That's right.
So, well, you know what? Let's figure something out here, everybody. You know, so for me, I'm looking at that. And by the way, I have folks telling me too, Rob, maybe you should host a TV show. My mom, she told me 2 years ago when I told her I want to run for office, she goes, no. You should be a CNN anchor.
I love it.
Cooper. And I was like, Mom, I don't know about all that. I was like, I don't know about all that. But I gotta go and try to fix Connecticut in any way I can, whatever capacity I can. And that's really what I've been I'm hopeful for in this upcoming year. So, you know, and however I can do my part and play my role in order to do that would be great.
And that's what we're all here for. That's great.
Rob, I do 14 shows a week. I would be willing to do a 15th, bro. Oh, I got all kinds of time. And I got a lot to say. That's why. Yeah. You ever want to do a show? I'd be happy to do it. Listen, I'm optimistic to hear that. You know, Dr. Amy Chai was talking about she's going to go solve New Haven's problems without Rosa DeLauro. And Rosa, I'm sure Michelle is welcome to jump in on that. I like the idea, and I hope Ned Lamont will follow up with you because your ideas on inflation and the economy are better than his.
Yeah.
And I think if the one thing when he won that I like Susan Bisowitz a lot, our lieutenant governor. She's got a long career in this state. I respect her a lot. I felt like her being there with him, like, all right, we got this. This will be all right.
Calms it down. Yes.
You know, and she's a great politician. She knows her stuff. The idea that he's open to listening to different people and maybe to have Rob come in and have some conversations to fix things, that makes me feel optimistic because you know what? At the end of the day, we're all nutmeggers, right? We all want this state to be the best it can be, and it doesn't have to necessarily be from your tribe. As Rob was saying, we could pick from all the tribes, and we could all sit together, get all the chiefs together, blow some smoke, and figure some things out.
That's right.
Right.
Why not?
Right. And then look, if again, that's the way I'm looking at it. If I can help bring, like, for example, Chip, I still look at having my partners. He had a lot of, but we just gelled, and I would throw an idea, he'd throw an idea, and then we had these, and of course we'd have input from the rest of our team. But a lot of that was organically between me, Chip, and several others. And you think about it, and it's like, well, look, if I can get in a room, and if I can become a bridge. So even if Republicans didn't get any of the big seats, but if I can get in a room and I can bring one or two folks with me and go, guys, it may not be bipartisan legislature here we're talking, but let's just figure out some approaches on how to approach the budget, approach, you know, jobs and economy, taxation, whatever it is, before it even gets to the legislature, or have us weigh in. And you go, you know what? I don't even want to hear that word bipartisan because that really means it's only two parties. It really should be a multi-party approach.
Oh, good point. Good point.
You know, and then there's the blessings of a lot of folks who go, you know what, that makes sense. And being challenged, because honestly, let's be real about really the issue we have with decades. Democrats are not going to challenge the other Democrats. They're just not.
Right.
And when you have that situation, it's better to have an outsider who can work with you and challenge you and go, well, I don't know if they're not argumentative. They're just they're playing devil's advocate and seeing a different angle and go, did you think about this, and challenge you to it. It gets a better outcome. And I think that's really where we need to get to. And I think if we do that, a lot of folks in Connecticut may also feel differently because right now they're putting all their trust in one basket. All their eggs are in the Democratic basket right now for whatever reason. And we need to show the Connecticut voters, guys, we understand that you trust the Democrats a whole lot, but maybe there's some other leaders. And look, here's my guy right there, Mr. Chip. Dr.
Hey, how you doing?
Hey, well, Rob, hold those thoughts because Joe and I will be going to the Capitol February when legislation starts, the legislative sessions, and we're going to try to change legislation. Like Joe said, we're all nutmeggers, and so this sounds great. So definitely keep those thoughts open.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey, Chip.
Hey, how are you guys? Sorry, I just got out of the doctor's office, but appreciate being on.
Clean bill of health or what?
What?
Clean bill of health?
Yeah, I messed up my back right before the
Oh,
weekend, and it's
ow.
been killing me. So I can walk and talk now, so it's getting better.
He's getting the chip of all the ideas Michelle upgraded.
There you go.
There you go.
That's how you work. I see. Okay.
Performance enhancing technology.
I love it.
Well, you know, these technology guys, it's like James Bond. They shoot something in your neck, and there you go.
You got to share.
Yeah.
Dr. Chip, your thoughts about the campaign? Obviously, not what we were hoping for, not what you guys wanted, but you know, a great friendship and partnership emerged with you and Rob Hotaling. You know, we were kind of asking Rob what's next for him, what's next for you, and maybe just kind of walk us through your feelings and about the whole process here.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I talked to a couple people before the election, you know, the polls yesterday that, and there are some people that are interested in a moderate caucus in the legislature. And I said, hey, if you guys want to go over some of these ideas, that's more important than me signing my initials at the bottom of some paper. So if we can talk to some people about implementing some of these ideas, I think it would really move the state forward. Other than that, maybe position papers. You know, the closed primaries really mean that we don't get a very good choice of candidates, I think, to represent a lot of the middle of the state. So without some change in that, I think we're gonna have outside pressure more than elected office people.
I agree. We're gonna make some noise.
But, you know, the people have to engage too. And that's the other challenge is how do we get people to be engaged? They're really good about putting it on Facebook and Twitter about how bad everything is, but it's really hard to get people to talk about what is a solution that would work.
Rob and I were just floating the idea of doing a show, Dr. Chip. Maybe
there we go.
17th
show. There you go. 16th.
I'm down.
So Rush Limbaugh changed the world. So, you know, Joe, that's not a bad idea.
Can't hurt.
I will say, but Chip, to your point, so like people engage. I do believe that we've hit a note with a lot of people. They felt, and Chip, you weren't here for the beginning of the show, but I sort of mentioned to Joe and Michelle that there's a lot of people who contacted us, our campaign, and they essentially had the same thread, the same pattern, which was, we really like the Hotaling Beckett plan. We thought that I've had teachers who said it's the best. I have email where it says, this is the best plan. I've been a teacher for 30 years in Connecticut, and you and Chip's plan is the best plan we've seen in decades. And I'm like, I want to like put it on my wall, man. And it's like, it makes me like proud, right? That I can do this with Chip. And I think that just this last point on this, which is, I think we've touched a nerve with a lot of people and they feel positive, and maybe there's some momentum we can grow and an inspiration. And, you know, I think we need to really tap into that, continue to build on this going forward.
I can't agree more. We need to make some noise. There's got to be some pushback in a good way.
Also, Dr. Chip, we discussed fixing the Republican Party top to bottom.
We're going to nominate Joe. What do you think?
Well, you know, I just driving back, Dan Hart was just on talking about Republicans' problem is the open primaries because the most hardcore people elect them. And I think it's the Democrats too. The reason I would never consider the Democratic Party is because of the crazies on the left who preceded the crazies on the right. So I think the open primaries are really our best solution to get better candidates, and then ranked choice voting. But I think if you're going to have two major parties and third parties can't get any traction, then I think we have to have open primaries, and the public pays for them, so the public ought to be able to participate.
Right. Yeah. I was talking to Joe too, you know, another show. We just talk about, we just need more referendums. The whole point of government is we the people. And so the referendums they just have to happen more and more. Like, you know, the early voting, it was great to see. You know, it's what the people wanted.
Yeah, I think those sorts of structural things make a lot of sense to be referendums. And I think that was the early voting is a good first step for people to realize we could modernize our Constitution. We don't have to be stuck in the 1830s forever.
Right.
Right. I mean, so speaking of ranked choice voting, right? So Lamont's on the hook to introduce this in legislative session. So when you two are up there, you can ask him, hey, you stood on the Capitol steps with Monty Frank and made a commitment to introducing ranked choice voting.
That's right. And you're coming, right, Rob?
Right. So if it doesn't get a lot of support in the legislature, then it should be converted to a referendum and give it to the voters.
Yeah.
And because the presidential election 2024, you can get on that ballot and let the voters vote on whether we should have it or not.
Again, as somebody who voted for Oz Griebel and who knows full well Oz Griebel would not have wanted that endorsement to go to Ned Lamont, you could trust that I'm going to be pressing on Ned Lamont to fulfill the promise that he made to that ticket when he took that ballot line. That wasn't just I'll do it. No, I'm going to make sure that Ned Lamont does it. I won't let Ned rest for the next 4 years if he doesn't at least do something to push that idea out there. So,
well, Joe, that goes to a lot of political people, though. How many promises get made and people say nothing changes, but how much does the news media really push people?
Welcome to politics.
You
right?
said this on July 30th, on the steps of the Capitol.
Yes.
What have you done about doing it?
Dr. Chip, I like to think I'm one of the few people in the media where I don't if I tell you a story today, I'm going to see that story through to the end. And I'm going to constantly update people on said story. I feel like that happens far too much in the media, where something's a story for a week and then everyone forgets about it and no one ever follows up. And we don't even know how the story ended. And you'll hear someone 6 months from now talking about, and I hear them talking about the story and I'm like, oh, did you know 3 months later, this is how it resolved? No, they had no idea because they stopped reading it after that first week. I'm tired of that kind of stuff. And I think we need to start holding people accountable. If you're going to flap your gums and say something, especially in front of me, oh boy, you better have every plan to do it, or I'm not going to shut up about it.
Well, this is how
I think the news media has a big part in all this. I think.
Well, the news media is failing, and everybody knows that. I mean, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's been an absolute failure and a disaster.
Well, but I think, they hold themselves out to be the fourth estate. I think they need to make sure they cover the nuances better. I understand the advertising pressures, but just like Rob's ideas, but then they write half-page stories and they don't even mention Rob's name in the story.
Right. We talked about that.
And Michelle Bicking was never in any of the stories. Right. I mean, even if there was just a few lines about other ideas, it would really change how people's news awareness of what the possibilities are. That's
right. Well, we talked about, Bob Stefanowski, out in the open, sued the Independent Party. So he was out in the open, but, Ned Lamont kind of nefariously went over Michelle Bicking's head and, got the endorsement that it was supposed to go rightfully to her. And so, however you play it, they're playing it. And this is how I think as voters, myself too, we become compliant. Yeah, politicians, they always promise us stuff and never happens. And then, next election comes and we still vote the same way. So this is where, Rob, you were talking about this and something has to change.
Well, and the other thing is, I had a lot of people complain about how does somebody have 2 or 3 lines? I mean, I think in a lot of ways.
Oh, isn't it crazy? Yes.
It should be, pick the line you want to be on, but it's confusing for the voters to read the ballots. It's harder to print the ballots. And if there's a blank space because they don't have a nominee, that's fine. If they have 5 nominees from 5 parties, that's fine.
I agree.
All right. Well, gentlemen, again, proud of you both. Had a pleasure this campaign, getting to know you both pretty well and having had multiple conversations with both of you now together and separately. I think you're great guys. I think where your politics are at is very much in line where the state is at. And I think the sooner the state realizes it, I think the better off we're all going to be.
Yeah, I would agree. I just want to record that, Joe, and play that over and over again.
Yeah. But we're definitely going to talk to you guys more. I want to make sure that you get an audience with Ned Lamont and Dr. Beckett, whatever you're going to get involved in, hit me up, because I'll make sure that we hold people's feet to the fire and we get some things done. It's a great state. We all love it. We all have different viewpoints. Like Rob was saying, we all get together and throw some ideas out there. Boy, we could be really great, and it could really help to bring everybody in this state together, because it's still pretty twisted at this point. So,
absolutely.
Yeah,
it's been a pleasure, guys.
Well, thanks very much. Keep in touch.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Of course.
Thanks.
All right, well, that's going to do it for us this evening. For Michelle Bohtello, I'm Joe Aguiar. Thanks so much for watching Connecticut Politics TV Live.